Hello, it's Mr. Ethel here, and this is a video to help you to think about the question that you're about to write an essay about, which is, in what ways can A Doll's House be considered countercultural in its depiction of marriage? Okay, so we're thinking broadly about how this can be considered countercultural, and I want to alert you to some ideas and ways in which you might talk about it, and then your job will be to go into detail with those ideas, find textual evidence, and build a big old argument about it, and write a wonderful essay. So, first of all, let's think about form. Okay, so I've talked to you about in class about the fact that A Doll's House is to be considered a naturalistic play from the form of naturalism. And I want to talk now just about kind of what the opposite of naturalism is and what else existed at the time that kind of countered naturalism. So the opposite of naturalism is romanticism. And lots of plays at the time would have been considered romantic, and naturalism came as kind of a protest against that an alternative way of presenting plays. So in romanticism, we would have found kind of common things we'd find in romanticism are things like very unreal situations, very fanciful plots. We'd find lots of royalty, lots of characters of great prestige. We'd find kind of heroic tragedies where a hero goes on a quest and maybe encounters some huge challenge and tragic circumstance that happens to him. A lot of the lines would have been in rhyme, they'd be poetic, or the speech would be very poetic. And also, you'd encounter a lot of melodrama, so kind of out there acting, kind of huge emotional displays throughout it, which is very much the opposite of naturalism. Naturalism is the opposite of that. Naturalism essentially seeks to deliver something that is similar to the lives of its audience, that is similar to what they experience day by day and reflects their lives in some way. Maybe not literally what's going on, but it's got the kind of people that we meet each day. It has real life circumstances, the unhappiness we might find in naturalistic places, the kind of challenge, the unhappiness and challenges that people might find in their lives. So with A Doll's House, we've got a fairly ordinary marriage between two middle class people. Um, they're seemingly happy at the beginning, although only really happy on the surface. Nora is slowly realizes her dissatisfaction as the play progresses and starts to understand how dissatisfied she is through the circumstances that happen. Similar to how many people in the audience or many people at the time would have felt about their own marriages, maybe dissatisfied in some way, particularly marriages that are there for kind of society's sake rather than love. So these people have come together because they exist within the same social sphere rather than they love each other. They have a marriage of kind of wealth and convenience. But in terms of true love, that doesn't really exist. And Nora realizes that. She develops as a character throughout the play and realizes her dissatisfaction. Um, and the naturalistic side of it, the naturalistic form, is something that goes against the culture of the day in that it exposes what's going on below the surface. It exposes things that society would prefer not to be exposed. And naturalism is the perfect form for that because it shows very natural stuff and doesn't hide the psychology and the human psyche, the stuff that's going on within people's minds. It doesn't hide it. And so it goes against culture by exposing the things that are hidden that culture would want to hide. Okay, I want to also think about this question in terms of archetypes that we might generally find in literature and how Ibsen kind of goes against those archetypes. So, an archetype is a stock character that we find in many pieces of literature, many plays. So, a kind of a stock character might be a knight in shining armor, or a damsel in distress, or your stereotypical villain. We call them archetypes, things we expect to find in stories. You can also have archetypal plots. So, like a love triangle would be an archetypal plot, something we might expect to find in a story. So, A Doll's House very much goes against archetypal characters. So we don't find your typical character. No one is kind of fully likable in terms of their presentation. Every character has got flaws, um, and there's a sort of uneasiness about that. I know when I read a novel or watch a play, I often kind of want to align myself with one of the characters and feel like they represent me or my values in some way, or I can admire them and see them as a hero, and that's a very common thing in films, in plays, in novels. But A Doll's House doesn't really do that. I don't think anyone would really want to be, certainly wouldn't want to be Torvald or Rank or Krogstad or Mrs. Lind or Nora. None of them are kind of heroic enough or for us to want to be. Or I mean, maybe some of them are hateful enough. I mean, certainly we don't really like Torvald very much, but we don't have the stereotypical villain. In fact, the things that Torvald does wrong kind of fit into what society would expect of him, and so we're not judging Torvald, although we are judging Torvald and disliking him. We're judging the values of society rather than the character, and I think that's a big part of what Doll's House is about. We could say A Doll's House does have archetypes, though, in terms of its plots. So we have got the kind of love triangle, we've got the interest of Dr. Rank in Nora, and his love that can never be kind of anything come of that. So that exists within A Doll's House, so we have that kind of plot device, which is fairly common. Um, but other than that, Ibsen goes against having archetypes, and we can read A Doll's House or watch A Doll's House through that archetypal lens and say actually it goes against um, common common concepts that would have been included in literature of the time. And one more thing I want us to think about in terms of this question is how it goes against Victorian attitudes, particularly to marriage. So Victorian attitudes to marriage and attitudes to marriage still today in some cultures, within some world viewpoints, um, is that marriage is not something that can be broken. It's something sacred. That those vows last forever. There's also a sense of um, an understanding of God within that relationship, within the concept of marriage, that this is something that doesn't just bind two people together, but binds two people together under God and with God as part of that whole concept of marriage. So that would also be a concept of marriage that would be something that would be adhered to and understood more perhaps by a Victorian audience than by a modern audience. And also an attitude to marriage where the husband would be the leader within that marriage and would have the power within that marriage. So all of those things are challenged by just the story of A Doll's House. This marriage is not something that is going to last, obviously, because that's how the play ends. And at the time that A Doll's House was shown, huge pressure came on Ibsen to end his play in a different way. And in fact, he did. He did bow to that pressure, and some productions of A Doll's House at the time were changed, and Nora stayed. There was still the confrontation, but at the end, she felt she couldn't leave because of the children, and she stuck around, and their marriage continued, which in terms of what happens, it just doesn't quite fit in terms of the end of the play. So there was huge pressure. You see, it was so countercultural that culture tried to adjust the plot completely. Um, so there was concepts of marriage which were attacked by Ibsen. Certainly those three that I've mentioned in terms of religion and marriage, in terms of the sacred union of marriage lasting forever, and in terms of the role of men and women within marriage, which allows us as readers and watch this play to think about it from a few angles. We can think about it from a historical angle and think about how attitudes have shifted and changed, and how different audiences in different time periods would respond to this play, and we can also view it from a feminist perspective and see, how would a feminist receive this play. Certainly, the free choice that Nora makes at the end of the play is something that feminists would applaud and say that women need to be free to make those choices and to stand up against oppression and stand up for the things that they want to achieve. And that is something Nora does. So viewing it from a feminist angle is an interesting and important angle to view it from, and part of the reason why it was criticised so much in its day.